Joining me now in the studio, our political reporter, Marcia Kramer, as we've discussed historic, unprecedented. There are so many adjectives we could say. First of all, let's talk about this indictment that we learned about on Thursday. Still, we don't know what's in there until it's unsealed.
We don't know what's in there until it's unsealed, but there have been published reports, and people have talked to CBS News about the fact that it's expected to include about 30 or more counts of falsifying business records. Now, what Tony just said is that it's a Class E felony, and the reason why usually falsifying business records are a misdemeanor, but I'm being told that the DA was able to bump it up to a felony on the belief that the conduct that was done was intended to cover up another crime. In this case, it was election fraud and misuse of federal campaign funds.
And so we know that at some point, the defense, his attorneys, are going to try various things, from getting this thrown out to having the venue changed to what they think the judge should be recused, all kinds of stuff. But let's say the trial goes on, time period could be months.
It doesn't matter where the trial goes on. The question is going to be who is going to testify. And one of the things that we can tell you is that we can tell you the people who've gone into the grand jury and who have testified before the grand jury, who are expected to be witnesses in this trial. For example, one of the people who's going to be testifying is Hope Hicks. She's a close confidant of Donald Trump. Also, Kellyanne Conway. She was the campaign chairman for at the end of the campaign 2016, when these payments were allegedly authorized. Also, Michael Cohen, obviously, who is going to say that he was given these payments after he paid $130,000 to an adult porn star. But interestingly enough, there are several Trump Organization employees that actually went into the grand jury and testified, and that includes the controller, Jeffrey McConney, and the accounts receivable head, Deborah Tarasoff. Now, they actually testified before the grand jury, and they may be brought in by the DA to corroborate Michael Cohen's testimony. Remember, Michael Cohen is, to some people, an unappealing witness because he went to jail for this very thing.
And he admitted lying, and he has been speaking out a lot.
So the fact that he could bring in corroborating witnesses, we know that these people have testified before the grand jury. They're expected to be brought in to testify at the trial. Now, the interesting thing about this is a lot of these people are Trump insiders, and the fact that they would have to be forced to give evidence against a person that they had a close relationship with is going to be a sort of a bombshell at the trial.
We know the former CFO of the Trump Organization, Alan Weisselberg, is serving 5 months, but these are what we're talking about, these inside people.
Here's the interesting speculation, Dana. The question is whether Weisselberg is actually has an agreement to cooperate, whether they can force him to go into the trial and to testify. Now, he could say, I take the fifth, or they could say he's a hostile witness, but he could provide really damaging testimony, and here's why. Michael Cohen, in his book, says that Mr. Weisselberg is the one that handled the payments from Mr. Trump to him, and that Mr. Trump told Alan Weisselberg to do the payments. Now, remember why what these charges are about. So the allegation, and we have to say that it is an allegation, is not, in the indictment yet, is that these payments that were made to Michael Cohen were alleged to be payments that were supposed to be for legal work or a legal retainer. But according to reports, there's no evidence that there was ever a document of a legal retainer, which enables the district attorney to bring charges saying that these were actual payments that were illegal payments to cover up election.
And that's one of the things that so much of the speculation about, all right, 30 plus counts, one count can be one check.
Right.
Checks adding up to $130,000.
Well, not only that, but what we've also learned is that there were checks that were made on a monthly basis. So we don't know whether it was 12 months, 10 months, 3 months. So we don't know if it's a $10,000 payment or whatever. But generally speaking, when people are trying to cover up payments, they do it in lower amounts so that it doesn't arouse suspicion.
Just letting everybody know where we stand right now. It's 1:40 in the afternoon, and let's let's just say this day is going to be in the history books forever. April 4th, 2023, a former president being arraigned, arrested. He will be released on his own recognizance, but this is quite a day. You're looking at a live picture outside the courthouse, the Manhattan Criminal Court, a mammoth building that nearly takes up an entire block at Senator Hogan Place and Baxter Street. So we saw the former president get out of motorcade less than 20 minutes ago, Marcia. We know he's in there now. These things can take forever, a couple hours, but not in this situation.
I think they're going to expedite it.
Of course.
I mean, remember, he's a former president, and I think that you're going to see him treated very specially. There were reports.
This is the video. There he is.
Of him waving to his supporters, but he doesn't look really happy at that point. We should point out he's walking in. His shoulders are a little bit hunched. He's walking into the courthouse. But I think that you also have he's alleged that they're not going to handcuff him because he is a former president. And generally, you handcuff somebody who's in danger of being a flight risk. So they probably won't be handcuffing him. And there are also reports that they're not going to take a mugshot, but they probably will fingerprint him because that's part of the usual procedure. But they're not going to put him in a holding pen. They're going to put him in an interview room. He's going to be accorded all the dignity that a former president should be accorded before the judge calls him into the courtroom for the unsealing of the indictment.
Yes, and let's not forget the no handcuffs, but surrounded by Secret Service officers, agents, pardon me, which has been the whole way from Mar-a-Lago at LaGuardia to the Trump Tower and now at the Criminal Courts building. The indictment and his attorneys, you know, this will be new to them reading all of this. You know, you're explaining it to your client right there. How will that work? Do you have a sense?
Well, I think that what's going to happen, I mean, I think that they have a general sense of what they're going to be facing, because let's face it, they know the people who went in to testify before the grand jury. And I'm going to bet that they had conversations with them afterwards saying, what did you say? Especially the people that are closest to Mr. Trump, including Hope Hicks, Kellyanne Conway, and the Trump employees who still work for the Trump organization. So one could expect that they had some conversation and they know what the testimony will be. But nevertheless, they have to explain it to their client so that he can enter a plea. Now, we obviously expect him, as his attorneys have said, we expect him to plead not guilty and to wait for the next step.
Marcia, take a look here, and our viewers.
This is the courtroom.
Yes.
The corridor outside the courtroom, where you can see that there are a number of security people. Those are Secret Service agents. There's also court officers, and there's also members of the NYPD. You can see them with the uniforms, but there's also probably FBI agents. You can see the badge right there.
Enough.
That's a police officer.
And let's just say about this, because again, Judge Marcia not allowing video cameras inside the courtroom. He is allowing still cameras at the beginning, but the video cameras in the hallway, and you imagine how much media. Well, a couple are chosen to be what we call the pool camera. That's
a pool camera is a time-honored tradition in the criminal court building, and one we know is that his campaign has told CBS News that he expects to make a short statement to the pool camera before he walks into the courtroom. What it is, it could be anybody's guess, anybody's speculation, but he does want to have some sound, some statement that people can capture on video so that they can know how he feels on this day.
And again, in this huge building of courtrooms and all kinds of law and justice going on. From what we know, most of it is not happening today because of the security concerns, and they started sweeping the building, making sure it was secure quite some time ago.
Well, I was told that they were actually going to stop any of the trials that were going on in the building today to cut down on the number of people who would even be walking into the courthouse, because they wanted to clear the entire courthouse and stop all the other judicial proceedings. But you also, taking a look at that picture, you can see that there are lots and lots of security. The people that you see in the white shirts, those are court officers. The people that you see in the suits are either NYPD plainclothes intelligence protection people, or they're Secret Service agents. Most likely, those also include some FBI agents. I would imagine that his own personal Secret Service detail is with him in whatever interview room or holding room he's in, because they will come out with him when he comes into the courtroom.
Inside, just which floor is this? Is this the
15th floor?
This is the 15th floor. Okay. All right.